The gunshot echoed through the underground parking garage before Tae-Wook even saw the shooter. Instinct moved him sideways as concrete exploded where his head had been seconds before. 3 men emerged from behind black SUVs, their faces covered, their weapons raised. Tae-Wook's hand went to his waist, pulling the Glock he always carried, and fired twice without hesitation. The first attacker dropped. The second dove behind a car. The third rushed forward with a blade that caught the dim fluorescent light like a promise of death. Tae-Wook moved like water, redirecting the knife thrust and breaking the man's wrist with a sound that made even him wince. But there were more. Always more. A fist connected with his ribs, another with his jaw. He tasted blood, felt the familiar burn of adrenaline, and fought with the cold precision that had made him the most feared man in southern Korea. When it was over, he stood alone among the fallen, breathing hard, his suit torn, his knuckles split open. He didn't call his men. He didn't go to the hospital. Instead, Tae-Wook, chairman of the Cheonsa-pa syndicate and ruler of Busan's underworld, walked 3 blocks through the rain to a fashion boutique that should have meant nothing to him. But it meant everything. Because 6 months ago, his body had been declared broken, his manhood destroyed by injuries that medicine couldn't fix. And 3 weeks ago, a woman he'd only just met had proven every doctor wrong without even knowing it. If you're already hooked, do us a favor. Hit that subscribe button right now. Trust me, you'll want to see where this goes. And drop a comment telling us if you've ever met someone who changed everything for you in an instant. The story begins 8 months earlier, when Tae-Wook was still whole, still untouchable, still convinced that power was the only currency that mattered. He ruled from the shadows of Busan's glittering skyline, his influence reaching into every corner of the city's economy. Politicians took his calls, police looked the other way. Rival syndicates spoke his name in whispers laced with fear. He was 34 years old and had never lost a war, never shown weakness, never allowed himself the luxury of human connection. His penthouse overlooked the ocean, all glass and steel and brutal minimalism. No photographs on the walls, no personal touches. Just expensive furniture arranged with the precision of a man who controlled every detail of his existence. He worked 18-hour days, slept 4 hours a night, and trusted exactly 3 people in the entire world. Love was a weakness he'd watched destroy stronger men. Emotion was a liability he couldn't afford. Then came the car bomb. It happened on a Tuesday evening in March. Tae-Wook was leaving a meeting with a shipping magnate who laundered money through container ships. His driver opened the door. Tae-Wook stepped toward the black Mercedes, and the world exploded in fire and sound and searing pain that turned everything white. He woke up 3 days later in a private hospital wing, his body wrapped in bandages, machines beeping their mechanical reassurance that he was alive. His second in command, Min-jae, sat in the corner, eyes red from lack of sleep. The doctors came in with grave faces and careful words. The explosion had been meant to kill him, they explained. That he survived was miraculous. But there had been damage. Significant damage. Internal injuries that required multiple surgeries. And complications. The head surgeon, a woman in her 50s with steady hands and steadier eyes, delivered the worst news in clinical terms that somehow made it more devastating. The blast had caused severe trauma to his lower spine and pelvic region. Nerve damage, vascular compromise. They'd done everything they could, but there were no guarantees. His ability to function sexually might be permanently impaired. Might be. The word hung in the air like a death sentence wrapped in false hope. Tae-Wook said nothing, asked nothing, simply nodded once and turned his head toward the window. Min-jae started to speak, but Tae-Wook raised one hand, silencing him. When the doctors left, He lay in that hospital bed and felt something inside him calcify into stone. If his body was broken, then he would simply stop being a man and become what he'd always been meant to be: a force, a weapon, a king without human weakness. The recovery took months, physical therapy that left him drenched in sweat and silent rage. Nights spent staring at the ceiling, testing his body in the darkness and finding only numbness where sensation should have been. He tried 3 times with professional companions who knew exactly what to do, who were patient and skilled and utterly ineffective. Each failure carved deeper into his sense of self until he stopped trying altogether. He buried the shame beneath layers of cold efficiency and returned to his empire with a vengeance that made even his own men nervous. By August, Tae-Wook had consolidated power unlike anything Busan had seen in a generation. He absorbed 2 rival syndicates, eliminated 3 traitors within his own organization, and established control over the city's port operations that would make his family wealthy for decades. Everyone said he'd come back from the assassination attempt stronger than ever. No one knew that every night he stood in his penthouse and felt like a ghost inhabiting his own life. That's when Min-jae suggested the suit. "You need new formal wear for the summit meeting in Seoul," his lieutenant said, sliding a business card across Tae-Wook's desk. "This place just opened in Seomyeon. Ultra-exclusive, European-trained designer. The client list reads like a directory of old money and new power." Tae-Wook glanced at the card. Aurum Noir Atelier. Pretentious name. But Min-jae had good taste, and appearances mattered in his world. He nodded once. "Arrange it." "I already did. Tomorrow at 3. They're clearing the entire boutique for you." Of course they were. That's what people did when Tae-Wook decided to grace them with his presence. They emptied their businesses, silenced their staff, and prayed they didn't somehow offend the man whose displeasure could end careers or lives, depending on his mood. The next day, Tae-Wook arrived at Aurum Noir Atelier in his usual fashion: black Mercedes, tinted windows, Min-jae, and 2 other guards forming a loose perimeter. The boutique occupied the ground floor of a renovated building in Busan's fashion district, all marble floors and crystal chandeliers, and the kind of understated luxury that screamed wealth to those who understood its language. The staff stood in a perfect line, heads bowed, as Tae-Wook entered. He registered them peripherally, young, terrified, trying not to breathe too loudly in his presence. The manager, a slim man in his 40s, stepped forward with a bow so deep it nearly folded him in half. "Chairman Han, it is our profound honor to show me the suits." Tae-Wook's voice was flat, allowing no room for pleasantries or prolonged groveling. Of course. Right this way, if you'll please. The collection is in the private viewing room upstairs." The voice came from behind him, and it was wrong in every way that mattered. Wrong because it was warm instead of fearful. Wrong because it held amusement instead of submission. Wrong because it addressed him like he was a person instead of a myth. Tae-Wook turned slowly, and the world narrowed to a single point of focus. She stood near the spiral staircase, one hand resting on the chrome railing, her expression open and genuinely welcoming. She was younger than him, maybe late 20s, with deep brown skin that caught the boutique's soft lighting like polished mahogany. Her hair was natural, styled in a way that suggested artistry rather than vanity. She wore a navy blazer over a cream silk blouse, tailored trousers, and heels that added 3 inches to her already considerable height. But it was her eyes that held him, dark, intelligent, utterly unafraid. "You must be Mr. Han." She walked toward him with the confident stride of someone who owned the space she occupied, extended her hand, smiled. "I'm Nia Caldwell. Welcome to Aurum Noir." The manager made a sound like a strangled gasp, The staff seemed to collectively stop breathing. Min-jae's hand moved subtly toward his weapon. Nobody touched Chairman Han without explicit permission. Nobody smiled at him like he was a potential friend instead of a walking threat. Tae-Wook stared at the offered hand, at the woman who had no idea she was violating a dozen unspoken rules that kept people alive in his world. And then something impossible happened. His body responded. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable. A stirring of sensation where there had been only numbness for months, a flicker of heat that traveled up his spine and lodged somewhere in his chest. His heart rate spiked. His breathing changed. For 3 seconds, Han Tae-Wook forgot how to think. "Mr. Han?" Nia's smile dimmed slightly, concern creeping into her voice. "Are you all right?" He reached out and shook her hand, because his body moved on autopilot, while his mind struggled to process what was happening. Her grip was firm, her skin warm. The contact lasted exactly 2 seconds before he pulled away like he'd touched fire. "The suits," he managed, his voice rougher than usual. "Of course. Follow me." She turned toward the stairs, completely unaware that she'd just shattered the fundamental truth of Han Tae-Wook's existence. He followed, because his feet moved without conscious direction. Up the spiral staircase, through a doorway into a private viewing room that was all cream leather and soft lighting and mirrors positioned to catch every angle. Nia gestured toward a chair, but Tae-Wook remained standing, his hands clenched at his sides, his entire being focused on controlling the inexplicable response his body was having to this woman's mere presence. She began presenting suits, talking about fabric and cut, and the designer's philosophy with the passion of someone who genuinely loved her work. Italian wool, Japanese silk linings, construction techniques that honored traditional tailoring while incorporating modern sensibilities. Her hands moved as she spoke, elegant and expressive. She asked about his preferences, his typical style, what occasions he needed the suits for. She treated the consultation like a conversation between equals. And with every word she spoke, every gesture, every glance, Tae-Wook's body continued its impossible awakening. His pulse thundered in his ears. Heat pooled in his lower abdomen. Sensation returned to places that had been dead for months. Nerve endings, firing like they were celebrating their resurrection. It was overwhelming, terrifying, undeniable. "Mr. Han, you seem distracted." Nia had stopped mid-sentence, studying him with those perceptive eyes. "If this isn't a good time, we can certainly reschedule. I want you to be comfortable." Comfortable. The word was absurd. He hadn't been comfortable since the moment he'd walked into this boutique and met a woman who somehow, impossibly, had awakened what an explosion couldn't kill. "I'll take them all." He turned toward the door before she could respond. "Have them delivered." "All of them? But you haven't even—" "All of them." He was already moving, desperate to escape before she noticed the effect she was having, before his carefully constructed armor cracked completely. Min-jae fell into step beside him, confused, but professional enough not to question. The staff parted like water as Tae-Wook descended the stairs and strode toward the exit. "Mr. Han, wait!" He should have kept walking, should have gotten into his car and driven away and never returned. Instead, he stopped, turned. Nia stood at the top of the staircase, one hand on the railing, her expression somewhere between amused and concerned. "You forgot to get measured?" The statement was so mundane, so perfectly ordinary, that Tae-Wook almost laughed. Almost. Instead, he nodded once, a jerky movement that felt wrong coming from him, and left the boutique without another word. In the car, Min-jae finally spoke. "Boss, are you—" "Drive." They drove in silence through Busan's afternoon traffic. Tae-Wook stared out the window and felt his body humming with sensations he'd thought were lost forever. It made no sense. Medical impossibility. The doctors had been clear. The damage was permanent. The prognosis grim. He'd accepted it, adapted to it, built a life around the absence of desire. And then Nia Caldwell had smiled at him, and his body had remembered how to want. That night, alone in his penthouse, Tae-Wook stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows and watched the city lights reflect off the ocean. He'd spent the evening testing his body's responses, confirming what he'd felt in the boutique. The awakening was real, undeniable, but only when he thought about her. Her voice, her smile, the way she'd looked at him like he was human. He called his private physician at midnight, a man who'd served his family for 20 years and knew how to be discreet. Dr. Cho arrived within the hour, medical bag in hand, questions already forming. "I need you to examine me," Tae-Wook said without preamble. "Everything related to the injuries from the explosion." Dr. Cho's eyebrows rose, but he asked nothing, simply conducted a thorough examination that took over an hour. When he finished, he sat back, adjusting his glasses with the careful movements of someone delivering news he didn't fully understand. "Chairman Han, your physical recovery is remarkable. The nerve regeneration we documented last month has continued. But the functional impairment we discussed..." He paused, choosing words carefully. "Are you experiencing changes? Answer me honestly. Is spontaneous recovery possible at this stage? Medically, it would be extremely rare. The damage you sustained typically doesn't reverse itself, but the human body can surprise us. Psychological factors, neuroplasticity, even the placebo effect can create. So it's impossible. I didn't say impossible. I said rare. If you're experiencing improvement, we should document it, run additional tests, understand what's..." "That won't be necessary." Tae-Wook stood, signaling the consultation's end. "You'll bill the usual account." After Dr. Cho left, Tae-Wook returned to the windows. The city spread before him like a kingdom he'd conquered, but never truly possessed. Power, wealth, fear. He'd built an empire on these foundations. But one woman's smile had done what explosions and bullets couldn't. She'd reminded him he was still alive. He told himself he wouldn't return to the boutique, told himself it was dangerous, irrational, a complication he couldn't afford. He told himself these things for 3 days, while his body continued its impossible rebellion every time his thoughts drifted to Nia Caldwell's warm voice and unafraid eyes. On the 4th day, he went back. This time, he went alone. No Min-jae, no guards, no security perimeter. He simply walked into Orem Noir Atelier at 4 in the afternoon, like a man instead of a myth, and the staff nearly fainted from shock. Nia emerged from her office, saw him standing there unguarded and uncertain, and her face lit up with genuine delight. "Mr. Han, I was hoping you'd come back. Your suits are ready, but honestly, I'm dying to get your actual measurements. Those pieces I showed you would look incredible on you with proper tailoring." She gestured toward the stairs, already moving, assuming he'd follow. And he did, because his body moved toward her like gravity, like magnetism, like something beyond his control or understanding. In the private viewing room, she took his measurements with professional efficiency and casual conversation that should have felt intrusive, but somehow didn't. Her hands on his shoulders, his chest, his waist. Each touch was brief, appropriate, and absolutely devastating. Tae-Wook stood rigid, counting seconds, fighting to maintain the icy composure that usually came so easily. "You're very tense," Nia observed, stepping back to note something on her tablet. "Do you work out a lot? Your shoulder muscles are incredibly developed." "I train." The words came out rougher than intended. "Martial arts?" "Among other things." "That explains the posture. You move like a fighter, all coiled energy, always ready." She circled him, assessing angles and proportions with an artist's eye. But you hold too much tension here. Her hand touched the back of his neck briefly, clinically. That'll cause problems as you age. You should consider massage therapy. The casual intimacy of the gesture, the ease with which she touched him, sent another wave of sensation through his nervous system. Tae-Wook closed his eyes, breathing carefully, willing his body to behave. Are you feeling okay? Naya was in front of him now, looking up with concern. You seem uncomfortable. If I'm being too forward with the touching, please tell me. Some clients prefer I just... You're fine. He forced the words out. Continue. She hesitated, studying his face with an intensity that made him feel exposed in ways that had nothing to do with physical vulnerability. Then she nodded and resumed her work, this time narrating what she was doing, giving him warning before each touch. The consideration was unexpectedly thoughtful. When she finished, she stepped back with a satisfied smile. Perfect. I'll have the alterations done by next week. The charcoal suit especially. It's going to look devastating on you. Devastating. He repeated the word, tasting its weight. In the best way. You'll walk into a room and people will forget how to breathe. She said it matter-of-factly, like it was obvious, then caught herself. Sorry, that was unprofessional. I get enthusiastic about my work. You're not afraid of me. The observation came out before he could stop it, blunt and revealing. Naya tilted her head, considering the statement. Should I be? Everyone else is. Everyone else doesn't know you. She said it simply, like it was the most natural truth in the world. I just see a man who needs a good suit and carries too much tension in his shoulders. Although, she paused, a teasing smile playing at the corners of her mouth. I did Google you after your first visit. Chairman Tae-Wook of the Cheonsepa. Very impressive. Very intimidating. But you know what I noticed? He couldn't speak, could only wait for whatever she'd say next. In every photo, you look like you're performing, like you're playing a role. The feared kingpin, the untouchable boss. But just now, when you thought I wasn't looking, your expression was different. Human. Present. She shrugged. I prefer that version. Nobody had ever spoken to him this way. Nobody had ever looked past the carefully constructed facade and commented on what they found underneath. It should have felt invasive, dangerous. Instead, it felt like oxygen after drowning. Tae-Wook left the boutique that day without buying anything else, but he'd already made the most dangerous purchase possible. He'd bought into the fantasy that he could be human again, that someone could see past his legend to whatever remained of the man beneath. He came back 2 days later. Then 3 days after that. Then, with increasing frequency that his lieutenants noticed, but didn't question to his face. Each visit followed the same pattern. He'd arrive alone, stay for an hour, buy things he didn't need, and leave feeling more alive than he had in months. Naya never asked why he kept returning. She simply welcomed him, engaged him in conversation that ranged from fashion to philosophy to the ridiculous drama of her staff's interpersonal relationships. She made him laugh, something that shocked him so thoroughly the first time it happened that he'd actually stopped mid-sentence and stared at her in bewilderment. Was that... Did you just laugh? She'd looked delighted. I didn't know you could do that. Apparently, neither did I. Their conversations grew longer, more personal. She told him about growing up in London, studying design in Milan, the dream of opening her own boutique, and the terror of actually doing it. He told her almost nothing about himself, but listened with an intensity that clearly communicated his interest. She asked questions that were curious, but never intrusive, sharing observations about him that were unsettlingly accurate. You're lonely, she said one evening when the boutique was officially closed, but she'd let him in anyway. Not alone, I'm sure you're surrounded by people all the time, but lonely. There's a difference. Tae-Wook sat in one of the cream leather chairs, a glass of whiskey she'd poured him in hand, and considered denying it. How can you tell? The way you linger. Like you're in no hurry to return to wherever you came from. And the way you listen. Like you're starving for real conversation instead of whatever political theater you usually deal with. She sat across from him, shoes off, legs curled beneath her. I'm right, aren't I? You're perceptive. Occupational hazard. I spend my days reading people's bodies, understanding what they're trying to communicate through their choices. You're actually one of my more interesting case studies. Is that what I am? A case study? No. Her smile turned softer. You're my 4 o'clock appointment who keeps showing up at random times and buying suits you don't need because I think you're hiding from something. Or someone. Or yourself. The accuracy of her assessment should have alarmed him. Instead, it felt like relief. Like being seen was somehow less exhausting than being invisible behind his legend. What am I hiding from? He asked the question genuinely, curious about her answer. I don't know yet. But I think you do. And I think eventually you'll tell me, when you're ready. That night, driving back to his penthouse through Busan's neon-lit streets, Tae-Wook felt something shift inside him. It wasn't just physical attraction, though God knew that was overwhelming enough. It was something more dangerous, the beginning of trust. The terrifying possibility that Nia Caldwell might be someone he could be honest with. Someone who might not run from the truth of who he was and what he'd done. But honesty was a luxury he'd never been able to afford. And in his world, trust was usually the last thing you felt before betrayal. I hope you're still with us, because this story is about to take a turn that'll hit you right in the chest. If you're feeling this as much as we are, show some love. Hit that like button and leave a comment. Tell us, have you ever been afraid to trust someone with the truth of who you really are? Min-jae confronted him on a Thursday evening in Tae-Wook's office, where maps of Busan's territories covered one wall and security monitors displayed feeds from a dozen critical locations. We need to talk about the boutique owner. Tae-Wook looked up from the shipping manifests he'd been reviewing. There's nothing to talk about. You're going there alone, twice a week now, no security detail, no advance reconnaissance. You're making yourself vulnerable, and people are noticing. What people? Min-jae pulled up his phone, showed Tae-Wook a series of photographs taken from across the street. Tae-Wook entering Orem Noir. Tae-Wook leaving. Multiple angles, multiple dates. Surveillance-quality images that made his blood run cold. Who took these? We don't know yet. Could be rival syndicates. Could be ambitious people within our own organization. Could be law enforcement. But someone's documenting your pattern, and patterns are dangerous. Tae-Wook studied the photographs, his jaw tight. In each image, his face showed an expression he'd never seen on himself before. Anticipation. Hope. Humanity. The mask had slipped, and someone had been watching. Have her protected, he said quietly. Boss, discreetly. She doesn't know. But I want eyes on her at all times. And find out who took these pictures. I want names by tomorrow. Min-jae nodded, started to leave, then hesitated. Chairman Han, with respect, is she worth the risk? Tae-Wook looked at his most trusted lieutenant, the man who'd stood beside him through wars and betrayals and near-death experiences. I don't know, he admitted, but I'm going to find out. The photographs haunted him, not because of the operational security breach, that could be handled, but because they showed him the truth he'd been avoiding. Nia had become important, not just a catalyst for his body's impossible recovery, but someone whose presence had started to matter in ways that went far beyond physical healing. When he showed up at Orem Noir 2 days later, Nia took one look at his face and locked the front door behind him. What happened? Nothing. Don't lie to me. You look like you haven't slept in days, and you're wound tighter than I've ever seen you. She guided him toward the staircase. Come on, we're going upstairs. He followed because resisting felt like more effort than he could muster. In the private viewing room, she dimmed the lights and pointed at the chair. Sit. Nia, sit down, Tae-Wook. The use of his first name, which he'd never given her permission to use, but which she'd started using naturally over the past few weeks, made him obey. He sat. She disappeared into her office and returned with a bottle of single malt and 2 glasses. I'm not much of a therapist, but I'm an excellent listener, and whatever's eating at you is going to cause an ulcer if you don't let it out. She poured 2 generous measures, handed him one, then sat across from him with her legs tucked under her again in that casual way that suggested complete comfort in his presence. Talk. There are things about my life you don't understand. So explain them. I can't. Can't or won't. Tae-Wook drank half his whiskey in one swallow, felt the burn, welcomed it. People who get close to me tend to suffer for it. It's not metaphorical. It's actual danger. The kind that ends in blood and regret. Nia was quiet for a long moment, her dark eyes studying him with that unsettling perceptiveness. Is that why you come here alone? To keep me separate from that world? It's not working. Then maybe that's not the answer. She leaned forward, elbows on knees. Tae-Wook, I'm not naive. I know who you are, what you do. You think I don't understand the implications of the name Han Tae-Wook? I looked you up, remember? I know exactly what empire you rule. Then you should be terrified. Why? Because you've decided I should be? That's not how fear works. She set down her glass. I'm afraid of failure, of mediocrity, of dying without making something beautiful in this world. But I'm not afraid of you, because the man who sits in my boutique and laughs at my terrible jokes and listens like I'm saying something profound, that man doesn't scare me. That man seems like someone worth knowing. That man is a fiction. No, that man is who you are when you let yourself breathe. She reached across the space between them, her hand covering his. The contact was electric. Whatever danger you think you're bringing to my door, I can handle it. But what I can't handle is you disappearing because you've decided I'm too fragile for your reality. Her words broke something inside him. Or maybe they fixed something that had been broken. So long he'd forgotten what wholeness felt like. Tae-Wook turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers, and felt the full weight of what was happening between them. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. I don't know how to be someone who cares. Then we'll figure it out together. She squeezed his hand. But you have to be honest with me. No more walls. No more performing. Just you, whoever that is underneath the legend. He could have pulled away. Should have. Instead, he held on like she was the only thing keeping him anchored to reality. They sat like that for a long time, the city's sounds drifting up through the boutique's windows, the space between them crackling with possibility and danger in equal measure. When he finally left that night, it was past midnight. The streets were quieter, the normal crowds thinned to scattered groups of late-night wanderers. Tae-Wook walked toward where his car was parked 2 blocks away, his mind turning over Nia's words, feeling the ghost of her hand in his. The attack came from 3 directions at once. They were professionals, fast, coordinated, well-armed. The first blade whistled past his ear as he dove sideways, his instincts taking over before his conscious mind registered the threat. He rolled, came up with his gun drawn, fired twice at the closest attacker. One dropped, the other ducked behind a parked car. More came. 6. 8. Too many for coincidence, too many for a random mugging. This was targeted. Professional. the kind of assault meant to send a message or end a life, possibly both. Tae-Wook fought like a man possessed, his training and years of violence making him efficient even against superior numbers. He took down 3 more, but a pipe caught his shoulder, numbing his arm. A knife sliced across his ribs. His gun clicked empty, and he threw it at someone's face, heard the satisfying crunch of a broken nose. But there were too many. A kick to his knee sent him down. Fists and boots rained down. He tasted blood, felt ribs crack, knew this was it. They'd finally gotten him. After all the years, all the wars, it would end in a Busan alley because he'd been distracted, thinking about a woman who'd made him feel human. Then he heard sirens in the distance. The attackers heard them too. One last kick to his midsection, and they scattered into the night like shadows dissolving at dawn. Tae-Wook lay on the cold concrete, bleeding and breathing hard, staring up at the sliver of sky visible between buildings. He should call Min-jae, should get to a safe house, should activate the protocols he'd put in place for exactly this situation. Instead, he dragged himself to his feet, pressed a hand to his bleeding side, and limped back toward Orem Noir. The boutique was dark, but he knew she'd have an apartment above it. He found the side entrance, leaned against the buzzer until her voice crackled through the intercom, heavy with sleep. "Hello? It's me." His voice was ragged. I need. The door buzzed open immediately. He made it to the stairs before his legs gave out. Then Naya was there, still in her sleep clothes, her eyes wide with shock as she took in his condition. "Oh my God. Tae-Wook, what happened?" "Turns out you were right," he managed through split lips. "Being around me is dangerous." She didn't waste time with more questions, just got his arm around her shoulders and half carried him up the stairs to her apartment. The space was warm, lived in, full of fabrics and sketches and the comfortable chaos of a creative mind at work. She settled him on her sofa, then disappeared and returned with first aid supplies that suggested she'd anticipated this possibility. "I should take you to a hospital." "No hospital." He caught her wrist. "Please." Nia studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. "Then we do this here. But I need you to take off your shirt." His hands were shaking too badly. She helped him, her movements gentle but efficient, and when she saw the extent of his injuries, the knife wound across his ribs, the developing bruises, the older scars from previous violence, her breath caught. "Tae-Wook, it looks worse than it is. Don't." Her voice was sharp. "Don't diminish this. Don't lie to me about how hurt you are." She began cleaning the knife wound with antiseptic that burned like fire. "This needs stitches. Can you do it?" "I've done costumes for enough theater productions to know basic suturing. It won't be pretty." "Nothing about me is pretty." She paused, looked at him directly. "You're wrong about that." As she stitched his wound, her hands remarkably steady, her focus absolute, Tae-Wook studied her face, the concentration, the care, the complete lack of fear despite seeing him like this, broken and bleeding in her living room at 2 a.m. Most people would have run. She'd opened her door. "This isn't the first time," she said quietly, working on the last stitch. "These scars, they tell a story of violence that didn't start tonight." "No." "Are you going to tell me why? Or who?" "Rival syndicates. People who think removing me will create opportunity. They're wrong, but that doesn't stop them from trying. Will they come here? Will they target me to get to you?" Her bluntness was disarming. Tae-Wook wanted to lie, to reassure her, but she'd asked for honesty, and he owed her that much. "Probably. I've already assigned protection, but I didn't ask if you'd protect me. I asked if I'm in danger." She tied off the last stitch, cut the thread. "There's a difference. Yes, you're in danger. Because of me." Nia sat back, surveying her work. Then her eyes met his. Then I guess we're both making dangerous choices. She cleaned her hands with antiseptic wipes, then fetched him water and painkillers. You can stay here tonight. The sofa's comfortable enough, and you shouldn't be alone right now. Nia, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. She settled into the armchair across from him, drawing her knees up. Besides, I have questions, and you're not in any condition to run away from them. Despite the pain radiating through his body, Tae-Wook almost smiled. Ask. Why do you keep coming back here? And don't say it's for the suits. You could have any tailor in the country come to you. But you come here, alone, repeatedly, like you're looking for something. The painkillers were starting to work, dulling the edges of his discomfort and maybe loosening his tongue. Because when I'm here, I don't have to be Chairman Han. I can just be… human? Yes. The admission felt like releasing a breath he'd been holding for years. Everyone else wants something from me. Power, protection, permission, punishment. You just want to have a conversation. I want more than conversation. She said it simply, without seduction or calculation, just truth. I want to understand you, the real you, not the version everyone else sees. Tae-Wook's heart hammered against his bruised ribs. Why? Because I think you're worth understanding. And because when you smile, which is rare, it's the most genuine thing I've seen in this city. She stood, moved to the sofa, sat beside him with enough distance to be respectful, but close enough that he could feel her warmth. Also because my body responds to you in ways I can't explain rationally. I'm attracted to you, Tae-Wook. Probably have been since the first time you walked into my boutique looking like you'd swallowed glass. Her honesty was devastating. He'd built his entire life on secrets and misdirection. And here was a woman who spoke truth like it was the simplest thing in the world. There's something you should know, he began, the words harder than any he'd ever spoken. About me. About what happened after the explosion that nearly killed me. I'm listening. So he told her about the bomb, the injuries, the medical verdict, the months of trying and failing and eventually giving up. The shame that had calcified into a cold acceptance that he was broken in ways that couldn't be fixed. He spoke without looking at her, staring at his hands, half expecting her to recoil or worse, pity him. Instead, when he finally risked a glance at her face, he found only thoughtful attention. And then I met you, he continued, and everything the doctor said was impossible started happening. Just from being near you, from hearing your voice, from… He stopped, shook his head. It sounds insane. It sounds like your body was waiting for a reason to heal. Nia reached over, her fingers brushing his jaw, turning his face toward hers. You weren't broken, Tae-Wook. You were traumatized. There's a difference. Your body shut down because it was protecting you from more pain. But maybe it sensed that I was safe. That being vulnerable with me wouldn't destroy you. How can you be sure? I can't. But I know what I feel when I'm with you. And I know you feel it too, or you wouldn't keep coming back. Her thumb traced his cheekbone with aching gentleness. I'm not afraid of your scars, visible or invisible. I'm not intimidated by your power or your past. I just want to know if there's space in your life for something real. Tae-Wook captured her hand, pressed it against his face, felt the warmth of her palm like a benediction. I don't know how to do real. I only know how to survive. Then let me teach you. She leaned closer, her breath warm against his lips. Let me show you. There's more than survival. When she kissed him, it was gentle and questioning. Nothing like the aggressive encounters he'd tried to force after his injuries. This was exploration, not conquest. Permission, not demand. and his body responded like it had been waiting for exactly this. For softness instead of strategy, for connection instead of control. The kiss deepened slowly, carefully, both of them navigating territory that felt new, despite neither being inexperienced. Tae-Wook's hands found her waist, pulling her closer, despite his injuries protesting the movement. Naya's fingers threaded through his hair, her touch somehow managing to be both soothing and incendiary. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Naya rested her forehead against his. "Stay with me tonight. Not for anything more than this. Just stay. Let someone take care of you for once." He stayed. Fell asleep on her sofa with her curled against his uninjured side, her hand resting over his heart. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Han Tae-Wook slept without nightmares, without the constant vigilance that usually kept him in a state of half-awareness. He slept like a man who'd finally found shelter from a storm he hadn't realized he'd been weathering alone. Morning came with sunlight streaming through gauzy curtains and the smell of coffee. Tae-Wook woke to find Nia in her kitchen, still in sleep clothes, humming something as she prepared breakfast. The domestic normalcy of the scene was more surreal than any violence he'd experienced the night before. She caught him watching, smiled. "You're awake. How do you feel?" "Like I was beaten by 8 professionals. At least you're honest." She brought him coffee, black like he preferred. How did she know that? "Your phone's been buzzing nonstop for the past hour. I didn't answer it, but I'm guessing your people are panicking." Tae-Wook checked his phone. 37 missed calls from Min Jae, 15 texts, a voice message that started with, "Boss, where the hell are you?" and devolved into barely concealed panic. He sent a brief text, "I'm fine. Stand down. We'll report in at noon." "Are you really fine?" Naya settled beside him, her hand checking the bandage she'd applied last night with the practiced care of someone who actually gave a damn. "Better than I have been in months." He caught her hand, held it. "Last night, what you said, did you mean it?" "Which part?" "The part about wanting something real. Every word." She interlaced their fingers. "But I need to know if you're willing to try, because I won't be a secret you keep hidden. I won't be the woman you visit when you want to remember you're human. If we do this, I need you to be present, actually in it, not just passing through." The demand was fair, terrifying, but fair. Tae-Wook looked at their joined hands, at the contrast of her skin against his, at the simple intimacy of the gesture that somehow felt more profound than anything he'd experienced in his carefully controlled life. "I don't know if I can give you normal," he said carefully. "My life is complicated in ways that don't go away just because I want them to. There will be danger, scrutiny, people who will try to use you against me. I didn't ask for normal. I asked for real. Then yes, I want to try. I want—" He stopped, the words catching in his throat because they were too big, too vulnerable, too much like hope. "I want you, more than I've wanted anything in a very long time." Naya's smile was sunrise slow and twice as radiant. "Then we start there. If you're still here, still invested in Tae-Wook and Nia's story, then you're part of something special. Drop a comment right now. Tell us what you think happens next. Will their love survive his world? And while you're at it, smash that subscribe button because this is just the beginning." The next 2 weeks existed in a strange liminal space between Tae-Wook's 2 worlds. By day, he was Chairman Han, ruthless, efficient, handling the fallout from the assassination attempt with calculated brutality. His people found the ones responsible. The response was swift and served as a reminder to every rival syndicate why challenging Han Tae-Wook's authority was a fatal mistake. But 3 evenings a week, sometimes 4, he became someone else. He'd arrive at Aurum Noir after closing, and Nia would let him in with that warm smile that never seemed to diminish, regardless of what kind of day he'd had. They'd sit in the viewing room, or her apartment above, talking about everything and nothing. She told him about her childhood in London, the racism she'd faced in the fashion world, the terror and triumph of opening her own boutique. He told her about his father's death, the weight of inheriting an empire at 22, the loneliness of power that nobody acknowledged because fear didn't leave room for empathy. They didn't rush into physical intimacy beyond kissing. Nia seemed to understand intuitively that he needed time, needed to rebuild trust with his own body before he could fully share it with someone else. The restraint was both agonizing and healing, proof that she saw him as more than a conquest or a transaction. On a Thursday evening, 2 weeks after the attack, Tae-Wook arrived to find Nia in the viewing room with fabric swatches spread across every surface. She was wearing reading glasses and had 3 pencils stuck in her hair, looking simultaneously adorable and intensely focused. "You're designing something big," he observed, settling into his usual chair. "A collection for Seoul Fashion Week. It's 6 months away. But if I want to make an impact, I need to start now." She looked up, pushed her glasses to the top of her head. "Want to help? I know nothing about fashion design. I know. But you know about power, about presence, about commanding a room. That's what I'm trying to capture, the visual language of authority. Who better to consult than the most intimidating man in Busan?" The compliment, delivered with teasing affection, made him smile. "What do you need? Tell me what you feel when you walk into a room knowing everyone fears you. What's that energy like?" Tae-Wook considered the question seriously. "It's cold, absolute, like ice crystallizing around you, beautiful but untouchable. There's no warmth in fear-based authority, just the certainty that everything bends or breaks." Nia was writing rapidly in her sketchbook, her hand moving with the fluidity of someone translating concept to visual form. "And when you want someone to trust you instead of fear you, what changes?" "Everything." He stood, moved to where she sat, looked at the sketches taking shape. "Fear is static. Trust is movement. It flows. It's warmer, more vulnerable. Trust means opening spaces where fear demands closure." She looked up at him, her eyes bright with creative excitement, and something else he was learning to recognize: affection. "You're brilliant. Has anyone ever told you that? People tell me I'm powerful, strategic, dangerous, never brilliant. Then they're not paying attention." She set down her sketchbook, stood to face him fully. "Tae-Wook, can I ask you something personal?" "Always." "That night you told me about your injuries. Have things continued to improve?" The question made him flush, but he nodded. "Yes, completely. When I'm with you, when I think about you, everything works exactly as it should. It's like my body only responds to you. Not just your body." She moved closer, her hands resting on his chest. "Your whole self relaxes around me. The mask drops. I can see it happen, the moment you walk through my door and decide to stop performing." "Is that what I do with you? Stop performing?" "I hope so. Because the man I'm falling for isn't Chairman Han. He's the person underneath, the one who laughs at my terrible jokes and helps me think through design concepts and looks at me like I'm the most fascinating thing in his world." Tae-Wook's breath caught. "Falling for?" "Yes." No hesitation, no strategic retreat, just truth delivered with that devastating directness he'd come to crave. "I'm falling in love with you, Tae-Wook, and I think you're falling for me too, even if you're too terrified to say it." He should have deflected, should have reminded her about the danger, the impossibility, all the rational reasons why love was a luxury neither of them could afford. Instead, he cupped her face in his hands, and kissed her with an intensity that communicated everything his words couldn't. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. I am terrified. But yes, I'm falling for you. Have been since you first smiled at me like I was human. You are human, Tae-Wook. That's what I keep trying to show you. They made love for the first time that night in her apartment, on sheets that smelled like her perfume and possibility. It was slow, exploratory, punctuated by soft laughter and whispered reassurances. Tae-Wook's body responded without hesitation, without the shame or fear that had defined his previous attempts. Because this wasn't about proving something or conquering someone. It was about connection, about two people choosing vulnerability, despite every reason to armor themselves against the world. Afterward, lying tangled together in the darkness, Naya traced the scars on his chest with gentle fingers. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For trusting me with this. With you." She pressed a kiss to his shoulder. "I know how hard that was." Tae-Wook pulled her closer, feeling something in his chest expand past the point of comfortable containment. "You make it easy to trust. That's your gift. Or maybe you were always capable of it. You just needed the right person." They fell asleep like that, limbs intertwined, breathing synchronized. For those hours, Tae-Wook wasn't a mafia boss, or a feared kingpin, or a broken man trying to prove he was whole. He was just a man who'd found someone who saw past his legends to the truth underneath. But legends have a way of demanding their due. The crisis came 3 days later, delivered by Min-jae with a USB drive and an expression of barely contained fury. "We found out who ordered the hit." Min-jae plugged the drive into Tae-Wook's office computer, pulled up surveillance footage. "Jung-hwan. He's been consolidating power in the Eastern Territories, and he sees your—" He stopped, chose his words carefully. "Your distraction as opportunity." Tae-Wook watched the footage, saw Jung-hwan meeting with the men who'd attacked him, saw money changing hands, saw the moment Jung-hwan showed them a photograph of Naya leaving her boutique. Ice crystallized in his veins. "When was this taken?" "Yesterday." "Boss, they're not just targeting you anymore. They're planning something with her. We intercepted communications about a kidnapping, about using her as leverage to force you into a position where I'm vulnerable enough to kill." Tae-Wook finished the thought, his mind already racing through scenarios and countermeasures. "How long do we have?" "Intel suggests they're moving within 48 hours. They know about the protection detail, so they're planning something public. Somewhere she'll be without heavy security." "The Fashion District event." Tae-Wook stood abruptly. "Tomorrow night. She's being honored for Emerging Designer of the Year. She'll be exposed, surrounded by civilians. Perfect target. We could cancel it." "She won't. This award means everything to her." Tae-Wook grabbed his coat. "Increase the security detail. I want our best people in that venue. And get me Jung-hwan's location. It's time we had a conversation." "Boss, if you go after him now, it could trigger an all-out war." "Then let it." Tae-Wook's voice was cold, absolute. "Nobody threatens her. Not Jung-hwan. Not anyone. Make it clear. Naya Caldwell is under my protection, and anyone who touches her will pray for death long before I grant it." Min-jae nodded, already moving to implement the orders, but he paused at the door. "Chairman Han, are you sure about this? Once you make this statement, there's no going back. Everyone will know she's your weakness." "She's not my weakness." Tae-Wook's eyes were steel. "She's my strength, and anyone who doesn't understand the difference is about to learn." That evening, Tae-Wook went to Naya's apartment earlier than usual. She greeted him with her customary warmth, then stopped when she saw his expression. "What's wrong?" He told her everything. About Jung-hwan, about the planned kidnapping, about the danger that was no longer theoretical, but immediate and tangible. He watched her face as he spoke, saw the fear flash across her features before she controlled it. "So what do we do?" she asked when he finished. "We?" He'd expected panic, maybe anger, not partnership. "Yes, we. You don't think I'm going to hide while you handle this alone, do you?" She moved to her closet, started pulling out clothes. "The event tomorrow. I'm still going, but I'm going prepared." "Nia, it's too dangerous. Everything about this is dangerous, but I won't let these people dictate my life." She turned to face him, fierce and determined. "I worked too hard for this recognition to let some syndicate war take it from me. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to that event. I'm going to accept my award, and I'm going to do it with you beside me. Publicly. Let them see that I'm not some secret to exploit. I'm the woman you choose, and that choice has consequences. If I do that, there's no protection left. Every enemy I have will know exactly how to hurt me." "Good." Her chin lifted defiantly. "Let them know. Let them see that loving you isn't something I'm ashamed of or afraid to claim. Maybe if they understand, you're not just a kingpin, but a man capable of love, they'll think twice before trying to use me as a weapon." Tae-Wook stared at this incredible woman, who was either the bravest person he'd ever met or the most reckless. Probably both. "You understand what you're asking?" "I understand that hiding our relationship gives them power over us. I understand that love shouldn't be a secret that makes us vulnerable. It should be a truth that makes us stronger." She crossed to him, took his hands. "I'm not afraid, Tae-Wook. Not of them. Not of this. I'm only afraid of living a half-life where I love you in shadows and never claim it in the light." He kissed her then, deep and desperate, pouring everything he couldn't say into the contact. When they broke apart, he pressed his forehead to hers. "Tomorrow night, then. We do this together." "Together," she confirmed. The Fashion District event was held in a converted warehouse that had been transformed into an elegant venue with soaring ceilings and installations by local artists. The who's who of Busan's fashion and design community filled the space, along with journalists, influencers, and the kind of wealthy patrons who funded the arts with one hand while being blissfully ignorant of the underworld that operated beneath their gilded lives. Tae-Wook arrived with Nia on his arm, and the room's energy shifted like someone had cut the power. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. The sight of Chairman Han, usually seen only in dark suits, entering darkened cars, walking openly with a woman, smiling, actually present instead of ominously absent, was seismic. Nia squeezed his hand once, a gesture of reassurance, then stepped into the crowd with the grace of someone who belonged exactly where she stood. She introduced him to designers and critics, to friends and colleagues, treating him not as a notorious crime lord, but as her partner. The word she used, boyfriend, landed in the room like a declaration of war and peace simultaneously. His security team was positioned throughout the venue, invisible to casual observers, but hyper-alert. Tae-Wook tracked their positions reflexively while maintaining the facade of relaxed attendance. Min-jae had confirmed that Jung-hwan's people were here, waiting for an opportunity. When Nia was called to the stage to accept her award, Tae-Wook positioned himself where he could see every entrance and exit. She spoke with passion and humor about her journey, about taking risks and building dreams in a city that didn't always welcome outsiders. The crowd loved her. He loved her. And somewhere in this room, people were plotting to take her from him. The attack came during the reception after the ceremony. Tae-Wook saw the movement a second before it happened. 3 men moving with coordinated purpose toward Nia as she chatted with a group near the bar. He was already moving, his hand reaching for the gun concealed beneath his jacket, when Min Jae's voice came through his earpiece. "North entrance. 4 more coming in. Armed." The calculation was instant. If he fired in this crowded room, civilians would die. If he didn't, Nia would be taken. There was no good option, only the least catastrophic choice. Tae-Wook reached Nia just as the first attacker lunged. He pulled her behind him, took the blade intended for her kidnapping across his forearm instead. Felt the familiar burn of split flesh. The room erupted into chaos. Screaming, people running. His security team engaging Jung-hwan's men in a fight that was brutal and efficient. "Tae-Wook! Your arm! Stay behind me." He kept his body between her and the violence, fighting off attackers with a combination of hand-to-hand combat and the gun he finally pulled when one of them aimed at Nia instead of him. The shot was deafening in the enclosed space, but effective. The man dropped. We're at the absolute peak of tension right now. If your heart is racing, if you need to know how this ends, then show this video some love. Hit that like button, drop a comment with your reaction, and make sure you're subscribed, because you won't want to miss how this story ends. The fight lasted maybe 90 seconds, but felt eternal. When it was over, Jung-hwan's men were down or fleeing, and the pristine fashion event looked like a crime scene. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Tae-Wook's security was already implementing the exit strategy, clearing a path through the chaos. But Nia didn't move. She stood there, her dress splattered with blood, his blood, her face pale but her eyes blazing. Is it over? For tonight? Tae-Wook pressed his hand to the wound on his arm, felt the warm slickness of blood. "We need to go." "Not yet." She grabbed his uninjured arm. "Not until you promise me this is the last time. The last time you fight alone. The last time you decide what's dangerous and what's not without including me in the decision." "Nia, this isn't—" "Promise me," her voice cracked. "Promise me we're partners, or let me go right now. Because I can't love someone who treats me like fragile cargo instead of an equal." Tae-Wook looked at this woman who just survived an assassination attempt and was demanding respect instead of protection. Who'd watched him kill a man and wasn't running away. Who somehow still believed they could have something real despite the blood and chaos that surrounded his life. "I promise," he said hoarsely. "Partners. Equals. No more secrets." She nodded once, satisfied. Then her knees buckled. He caught her, held her as adrenaline gave way to shock, as the reality of what had almost happened crashed over both of them like a wave. "I've got you," he whispered against her hair. "I've got you." They left the venue together, ignoring the journalists' shouted questions, the police trying to secure the scene. Let them document it. Let them report that Han Tae-Wook had publicly claimed a woman, had fought for her, had chosen love even when it made him vulnerable. The secret was out, and there was strange relief in that truth. The war with Jung-hwan lasted another week. It was brutal, efficient, and ended with Jung-hwan's body found in the harbor with a message that was unambiguous to anyone in the underworld. The message, "Don't touch what's mine." But the real transformation happened in quieter moments, in Nia's apartment, in conversations that lasted until dawn. Tae-Wook finally allowed himself to be vulnerable completely, not just physically healed, but emotionally open. He told her about his fears, about the nightmares that still came sometimes, about the weight of ruling an empire that sustained itself through violence. And she listened, didn't try to fix him or change him, just accepted all of it. The darkness and the light, the power and the pain. She challenged him when she disagreed, supported him when he faltered, and loved him with a fierceness that somehow made him feel both protected and free. 3 months after the Fashion District attack, Tae-Wook stood in his penthouse with Nia in his arms, watching the sun rise over Busan. His body was whole. His heart was full. His life was still complicated and dangerous, but no longer empty. "I never thanked you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For not being afraid. For seeing me when everyone else only saw the legend. For making me believe I could be more than broken." Naya turned in his embrace, her hands framing his face. "You were never broken, Tae-Wook. You were just waiting. For someone brave enough to see the man underneath the armor. For someone who understood that strength isn't the absence of vulnerability. It's the courage to be vulnerable anyway. Is that what we are? Brave? No." She kissed him softly. "We're in love. And sometimes that's the same thing." He held her as the city woke below them, as his empire continued its business, as his world kept turning. But now he had an anchor, a reason that went beyond survival, or power, or the cold satisfaction of control. He had Nia. He had love. He had chosen to be human instead of myth, and somehow, impossibly, the world hadn't ended. Instead, it had finally begun. 6 months later, Tae-Wook stood in Aurum Noir Atelier and watched Nia work. The boutique was closed for a private client consultation, but he'd arrived early just to observe her in her element. She moved between fabric swatches with the confidence of someone who'd found her calling, her hands dancing across textures as she explained her vision. She caught him watching, smiled that smile that still made his heart do complicated things. "Chairman Han, are you here for business or pleasure?" "Both." He walked toward her slowly. "I need a new suit." "For what occasion?" "A wedding." Her eyebrows rose. "Anyone I know?" "Mine." He produced a small velvet box, opened it to reveal a ring that had been designed specifically for her, unique, bold, beautiful. "If you'll have me." Naya's breath caught. Tears filled her eyes. And then she laughed, bright and joyful. "You're proposing in my boutique, where we first met." "Where else would I do it? This is where you taught me how to be human again. Where you first looked at me and saw a man instead of a monster." He took her hand. "Where I started falling in love with the woman who refused to be afraid." "Yes." She didn't make him wait, didn't draw out the moment, just threw her arms around his neck and kissed him like he was the answer to every question she'd ever had. "Yes, I'll marry you." Later, after they'd celebrated and called friends and family, after the shock had worn off and reality settled in, they stood together in the boutique's viewing room. Nia wore his ring, and Tae-Wook wore an expression of contentment he'd never imagined possible. "They were wrong, you know," Naya said, leaning into his side. "Who was wrong?" "Everyone who said you were broken. You were never broken. You were just healing in your own way, at your own pace. You just needed someone who understood that healing isn't weakness. It's the bravest thing you can do." Tae-Wook kissed the top of her head, felt something settle in his chest that felt remarkably like peace. "Thank you." "For what this time?" "For changing everything." He turned her to face him fully. "For being the fearless woman who walked into my life and refused to let me hide in the shadows. For teaching me that love isn't a weakness, it's the only thing strong enough to save us." Outside, Busan continued its endless motion. Cars and people, and the machinery of a city that never slept. Inside Aurum Noir Atelier, 2 people stood in the soft light and chose each other despite every reason to armor their hearts against the world. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do isn't conquering kingdoms, or ruling empires, or inspiring fear in everyone who speaks your name. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is simply allow yourself to be loved. And Han Tae-Wook, the broken king, who was never really broken at all, had finally figured that out. So there you have it, the story of a man everyone said was broken, and the fearless woman who proved them all wrong. If this story moved you, if you felt every moment of Tae-Wook and Naya's journey, then you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. We've got more stories like this coming your way. Drop a like to let us know you were here. And comment below with your thoughts. What would you do for love? How far would you go? We'll see you in the next story. Until then, remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply allow yourself to be loved.